Thank you so much for reaching out to me, and I'm Matt Buckley. I'm the CACREP liaison, and I really kind of got appointed to this midway through the self-study process. So I'm still trying to get a sense of where I'm at with it, but just you being willing to answer some of my questions is really super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, these things change, and I'm willing to answer whatever questions I can with you today. Generally, when I have the first phone call with someone, I like to talk about my approach to managing a team and facilitating the visit.
Sure.
I would be more than happy to be a direct contact with you with this as questions come up that I can answer. You can feel free to contact me. My approach of working with teams is I like to, and with the site, is I like to facilitate a good team and like to make sure that we are transparent with what we're doing throughout the process. And, you might have been through other types of site visits where it's, everybody has an evidence room and everybody runs in and out of the room and it's kind of crazy. I try to reduce that and just say, as things come up, we're going to try and have communications and conversations with you directly. So you won't be surprised. You'll know what our process is probably through the kinds of questions we're asking and the things that we're concerned about. But we will hopefully keep the conversation going throughout our time with the visit, that you'll know what kinds of things we'd like to know more about.
Okay.
As I said, if you have questions, I can respond as best I can along the way prior to us coming on site. And often people want to know in the liaison wants to know, what should the visit look like? How should we schedule the visit? And, I have some templates, we have some templates with CACREP that give you an idea of who should be scheduled when. What I suggest to site team liaisons is take a look at what were concerns in your self-study first. And what you want to do is set up meetings with us and others that could best inform us around those particular areas. Now, obviously, we want to get a full look at the program, but when making decisions about who would be important people, take a look at how those informants can help us resolve any questions that are about your program. So think strategically about putting that schedule together.
Well, so do you have an example of a schedule that you could share with me, that
Well,
of something that you've done before in the past? Or I mean, we have people that we're thinking about, having come in, and of course we want to be able to schedule them, but do you want to talk to the president of the university? Is that necessary? I'm kind of new to this a little bit, so if you could
yeah.
help.
What I suggest is that depends on the culture of the university and the place we're going. There are some institutions where the president sees everybody who comes through that is an accrediting body. That's just the culture of the institution. And he or she does it because that's the protocol that they have at that institution. Now, often those meetings aren't as productive because they're not as close to the program and they're not answering the questions that we need to have, but it's protocol. So what I would suggest you do is make decisions about who we need to see based on who is going to help inform us about the program in the best way possible.
Okay.
So you don't have to necessarily look for those folks who are higher up in the university administration unless they're providing some way to inform us about, particularly about the program. So you move up as high in the process as you think these folks will be able to inform us.
So it's not a CACREP requirement that when you come and visit, you have to visit with the president or with the vice
No,
provost or, okay,
no. Typically I think we will visit with college deans as part of the process.
okay,
Sometimes we visit with provosts, and that might be because the provost is the person that's overlooking and overseeing the accreditation process. So that becomes a person that a person that protocol says we need to see.
okay,
But typically it's those folks who have direct impact on the program and its, how it plays out. So there might be some people in administration that we need to speak to because they're doing the evaluation or internal evaluation of the program.
okay,
And they then inform us how we know about how the program's maintaining its standards.
okay. Well, that's helpful. So I'm thinking, probably our dean of our College of Education. I'm thinking that probably our vice provost, because our vice provost really does have a lot of contact with the dean, and the dean's been very, very supportive. Now, I want to share with you, there's a little bit of a special circumstance in that, as I shared with you, I was brought in to help develop the program evaluation part of the self-study, and then I sort of got recruited to become the liaison, the CACREP liaison. So there's another faculty member, Dr. Levinson, who is, she was actually the original CACREP liaison. Is there a problem? Do you only talk with just me, or can you talk with her too? Or she wasn't so sure about whether there can be like co-liaisons.
I think we're happy to speak with, I think in terms of point of contact, we need to have one person.
Okay.
But
So
when it
I would
comes
be
to
that person.
when it comes to being on site or doing the site visit, we want you to select the people who can best inform us in the process.
Okay.
I mean, our job is to get to know your program, and there are stakeholders in the program who have that story, and it doesn't need to flow through all one person. So I think we'd be open to hearing her involvement and how that transition has occurred and where the program's headed in the future with it.
Okay. So do you need to meet with each faculty member separately? That was a question that the faculty were concerning. Would you rather have us as a group, or is it necessary that you meet with each one and do some sort of interview with each individual faculty member?
Different team chairs feel differently about that process. Some feel that they need to meet with each faculty member, and I'm just speaking from my style. I prefer to meet with the faculty as a group. And then as our team meets, if there are particular questions about the group course or particular questions about something with students, we might be directed to want to spend some time with a particular faculty member. But my style, again, carte blanche, I don't feel we need to have individual interviews with every faculty member. I would much prefer having that conversation with your whole group. once, maybe two times later on in the visit. But your schedule is something that you'll need to work out, I'm sure, for your own sake quickly, and for to be able to let people know who's going to be there and when they should be there.
Right. Okay. Well, one of the things that I had a question about is really like, when I was a doctoral student, I was part of a CACREP site visit. And of course, the site team came and visited us on site. Now we're in COVID, I'm not sure, like, what is it that you want to see? So for example, the site team, I remember that they wanted to visit the counseling lab and the library and other places. And I was there to help. I was a graduate assistant. I was there to help do that. But since you're not coming on the actual site, like, do we need to have a video camera where we take you through the counseling lab and show that to you? Or like, how does, like, what is it that we're to do with like our facilities, actually seeing the facility or the offices or whatever, the classrooms, that kind of thing?
Yeah, virtual visits are a lot different than on-site. In particular, it's the kinds of being able to be mobile and getting to get a sense of the real space.
Right.
I, I think it would be helpful for us to be able to see photos of the different facilities and the spaces that students work in. If you want to create an online walkthrough video where someone does a narrative about it, that would be great too. That would give us a richer sense of what your program does with students in terms of the training.
Mhm.
Um, Really, and then being able to interview and talk to those staff and faculty that are responsible for that. Of course, a necessary part of the process, whether we would be on site or whether we're doing it virtually. But to get a visual impression is very helpful for the team to see that the facilities that you have and the internship sites maybe they're going to are sites that provide a good clinical experience for students.
So that makes sense. Of course, we are, we're an institution that prior to COVID had classrooms, and now we've had to really make the transition into doing what we do online. So I guess what I could do for the actual visit is probably walk with my laptop and the camera and just kind of walk through the counseling lab and show you all um, what the lab looks like, and kind of do my own voiceover. I don't really have the technological expertise to put together an actual video, but would that be sufficient?
Sure,
Okay.
sure, that would be fine.
All right.
And even if they're just still shots and we can talk about them when we have our visit, that would be fine too.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else that you actually need to see around physical facilities? Would you want me to take my laptop during a Zoom meeting and go to the library and show you the library facilities, or
Uh,
we have like an institutional IT department that helps support faculty in their Blackboard classrooms. Like, do you need to see anything with that, or?
Again, I would go back to your self-study and see if there were concerns about that. We trust that you have a physical space, and the effort to go to, again, do a live stream of what the library looks like versus some still shots that go along with whatever questions or narratives that people might have in speaking to your library liaison or speaking to faculty will be helpful. I want to minimize the amount of jumping and running that you have to do when we're there.
Yeah, I mean, that's really helpful because we're, of course, everybody's concerned. We work very hard to get the self-study in place, and so yeah, that makes sense. Um, so is there anything that well, first of all, like I want to, I appreciate what you said about you being my contact person, because what I don't want to do, I know that you all do this voluntary, but what I don't want to do is bother you with too many questions. But is it okay that I contact you through email, and maybe if we have a Zoom meeting to kind of talk through some of these things, would that be all right with you?
Yeah, I've got to be careful about not being your consultant because I'm going to try and be in an evaluative role too. So, I think if you have questions about the process or you have questions about the format of what we're going to do, those are helpful questions where I can be helpful. If it turns into how should we handle this standard or how should we handle that standard, that kind of gets into a blurry role because
Yeah.
our job is to see that the standard meets the spirit. What you're doing meets the spirit of the standard, and not particularly a way that I think it needs to be met as the only correct way to do that. And I don't want to convey that because that adds confusion between my role as an evaluator.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, but I'm happy to entertain questions about logistics and the process. And, do you think it's okay for us to combine these groups of people? Would that work with the way you're going to do your visit?
Okay. And I'm just curious too. I know that we're going to be doing a virtual site visit, but like if we were actually doing where you and the team were coming in, like what what would you need in terms of like travel arrangements or eating arrangements or like a workroom, or like can you kind of talk with me about that?
Yeah. And this again is my preference. And so I want to, I'm very much minimalist in what I need.
Okay.
Um, and, I've been on visits where people have gotten us separate suites to be able to have our meetings. I would just rather have our, well, we're doing this virtually, so we're not in a
Sure.
hotel. We're in our houses and doing the meeting that way. But I'm very much of very much of a minimalist in that. We should have a space that's available to us if we were on site. We
Right.
should have a space that's available to us. That's a room that we can do our work in. That might have samples of the self-study and other support materials that we can refer to if we need. In terms of our hotel setting in that case, we wouldn't necessarily need a separate workspace at the hotel. That gets expensive and
Yeah.
gets difficult. As I said, in those cases, I'd rather meet in one of our rooms and just have the team talk through the process that way.
Okay.
And in terms of transportation, we're responsible for setting up our own transportation to get to the site if we're coming to the site. And you would be responsible once we get to the site to making sure we have transportation available to go from hotel to institution and back. And in cases if if the hotel was not located around establishments to eat, we'd look for some transportation, or we would work out some transportation with CACREP, whether that be Uber or some other concern. But primarily your CACREP likes to have the program absorb the cost of getting us from the hotel to the institution, and by providing us transportation, and also transportation from the airport to the hotel.
Okay.
So that would be an expectation around transportation. The hotel would be we would take your recommendation. And often what institutions do is they hold rooms for us at a hotel,
Okay.
but it's our responsibility to pay for them. So they might hold them at a government rate or a university rate for us. But once we get there, we need to put them on our credit cards.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. We were,
to
we were,
that, yeah, to that fact, I ask you also to be reasonable. We don't need a 5-star hotel with jacuzzis. That's not going to impress us. It's going to probably depress us, because eventually that cost goes back to CACREP, and that cost sits on our credit card. So really, we're going to be there to work and to sleep, and so be reasonable about making those decisions.
yeah.
We're all academics, and you know what that's like.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. And it just helpful to know the difference between the virtual visit and whether you were on ground.
Yep.
Speaking of student, I'm concerned about like student files. So student, academic files or field experience files, like what do you need to see in terms of like artifacts? I mean, we provided some examples in our self-study, but do you need to see anything around student files?
Well, typically, visits provide us with the opportunity to look at student files. And again, different programs handle it different ways. Different team chairs handle it different ways. I think the objective of us seeing student files is we'd like to, one, know that files exist and that materials are kept in an orderly fashion. And secondly, we'd like to be able to see files that reflect the progression of a student through a program. So sample files that provide us examples of students who are newly admitted to the program. Sample files that show students in the middle of the program, and sample files that are near the end of the program, to give the reviewers an idea of how those files change and what kind of documentation gets added along the way. This might sound challenging, but if there is a particular student that had issues that required intervention on the part of the faculty to address some changes with the student, an example file of that and the documentation that goes to support that is helpful, because we want to look at the standards that address that you are addressing remediation when needed. So
Right.
a lot of times programs are concerned about putting their best files forward, and you can do that, but it's also helpful and informative us to see examples of the remediation process and how it impacted or changed over a period of time.
Well, when it comes to like electronic, like our files are electronic, and I'm concerned about like FERPA and potential violations of FERPA. So like, it seems really burdensome to de-identify a student's file. Like, what do you need to see? Is it a matter of me just pulling up, and sharing my screen to show what a student file would look like? I'm concerned about student confidentiality.
Yeah, you need to de-identify material that you're planning to show us. And, whether that means you put it in a PDF format that's blacked out or some way to de-identify. Again, look towards the minimalist way of trying to give us the information we need. So in some cases, here are examples of forms that we use in the internship process. And then maybe here's one example of the logs filled out by the student with the student's name removed.
Okay.
Those kinds of things to be able to, again, our purpose in looking at files is to verify that you have that system arranged and that you are keeping records on students, but to also get an understanding of the progress of a student through the program.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, it's not like we need to review 20 of them so we can catch you on one.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah, I think you've really answered my questions like initially, so it's helpful to know that I can contact you again. I guess one of the questions I have is, when will I hear from you next?
Well, I think your first step is to start to construct that schedule around
Okay.
the, you know, when we arrive and what's going to happen. My preference is not to have, and some programs feel it's sort of cordial for us to all meet the faculty and have a big dinner the night before. I prefer not to have those dinners, and I probably haven't had one in years. It just, again, blurs that line between evaluator and a colleague.
Right.
And, you know, we're all professional colleagues, but in this case, we're in the role of evaluator.
Yeah.
So, you know, you and I can work on, you can start to construct a sample schedule. And I can give you some feedback in terms of that seems pretty long for that meeting, or that seems pretty short for that meeting. And that would be the next step. So I would suggest I can send you a template that CACREP has that suggests samples of it. You can work from that in constructing your own. But remember, the purpose is for you to make sure that we have contact with major stakeholders in the program. And at the same time, if there are specific things you want to address or share with us to tell your story, that should be included in the schedule process.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
we can work on that. We can work on what that looks like. You can ask questions along the way. But once that schedule, I'm sure you want to get that schedule firmed out as soon as you can. And then as questions come up, should they come up, I will try to address them as we can. Typically, what I will do is meet with my team a couple of weeks before the site visit. And we will have some discussion about things that are essential for us to take a look at. And I will give you that feedback. So we're not arriving on site on Sunday or starting our visit on Sunday and saying, oh yeah, we need all this data. I don't like to ask for things that we don't need.
Right.
So as a team chair, I try to screen through that. Do we really need to have that?
Okay.
And how does that inform us around the standard? So, but you know, if there are concerns, I'll let you know, so you can maybe think, here's somebody I didn't think of that they needed to speak to that they can speak to now.
Okay. Yeah, and that actually brings up one more question. Do you need access to all of our classrooms? You know, we're in Blackboard now. Like, do you need access to see the classroom? I know that you've reviewed the syllabi, but do you actually need to get in a classroom?
You know, without having seen your self-study yet, if there were concerns, there were curricular concerns, that would be a case where a team might say, can we take a look at the diagnostic class? You know, beyond the syllabus.
Right. Okay.
But carte blanche, getting us in all your courses, that's not an issue for the team unless there are particular questions about how assignments are done in a course. And that can be accompanied by, in our case, in a virtual visit with the instructor opening up the course and screen sharing. and showing us what we're looking for. So,
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that I really appreciate you describing that, and I don't really have any more questions. So thank you, Marty, for meeting with me, as I said, and I really appreciate that. It makes me feel a lot um, a lot less stressed about this. So
well, this is a great service. For programs to go through this process, it's really requires a lot of work, but it's great that you are wanting to do this to be able to show and establish and maintain your accreditation and your credentials as a program. As a team member, it's just a great pleasure to be able to do this job in terms of working and evaluating programs and having conversations with colleagues about how they do things and how they manage to maintain their standards. So
yeah.
it's the best hard work that I think anybody can do. So,
Well, we really appreciate your service. I know that you're not paid to do this, and it means a lot. So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
okay.